Hey, I'm Steph. I'm a motivator, creator, small business owner, and educator. I'm a lover of all things health, spirituality, inspiration, and business. These are just a few words to describe me, along with passion, grit, and resiliency. Regardless of what I'm up to, I am soul-driven to create a purpose-filled life and find the advantages in adversity, all while keeping a smile on my face.
Soul Driven with Steph is a podcast that will fill up your cup and leave you feeling empowered, inspired, and on fire as you listen to interviews and stories of other soul-driven and strong women that have overcome against all odds. This podcast was a calling on Steph's soul to serve, connect, and share stories of struggles and successes, all to create a community so that you know you're never alone. Grab a cup of coffee, get ready to learn, laugh, and leave with wisdom and strategies to connect to your soul and get back in the driver's seat of your life today. Here's Steph.
Wow, welcome back. I am so excited to be back on the mic with you all today on the season 2 of the Soul Driven with Steph podcast. It is wild to think that the last time I hit record, not only did I have a baby in me, but I think it was September of 2024. And here we are in June of 2025. I'm so excited to be back on the mic with you today because when we left off last, I was preparing for my maternity leave, which I thoroughly enjoyed and we'll talk more about in later episodes in this season, but I didn't really know how I was going to come back to the podcast and how this creative endeavor would fit into my new life as a mom and trying to run multiple businesses and, just enjoy life and business and all the things. So I'm very excited to share the relaunch of the Soul Driven with Steph podcast and how we are launching it alongside a very special creative endeavor that I have been undergoing for the last 2+ years that I didn't really tell anyone about until more recently. And that is the launch of my very first book. And I am so thrilled to be on the podcast here today with a copy of my book in hand. And it's called Seasons of a Soulpreneur: How to Embrace Your Circle of Growth as a Small Business Owner. And today's episode is honestly going to be all about the behind the book and all of the things leading up to launching a book, what inspired it, how I wrote a book and got it done in, pregnancy and then coming out of my maternity leave as a new mom. Just so many surprises to share today. So welcome back to the Soul Driven with Steph podcast. Thank you so much for being here, for listening. For those of you that were past listeners and just waited out the pause of when this podcast is coming back, thank you. If you're a brand new listener, welcome. I can't wait. Let's dive in. Behind the book. So I have had lots of questions like, how did you write a book and grow a baby and have a baby and then launch a book alongside running multiple businesses? And it really has been an entire journey of surrendering, which is ironically what the book is all about. So let's rewind. This is going to take us back to the fall of 2022. And if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, or if you just know me and my journey, you know that I made a very difficult decision at the end of that year as I was pivoting my entire life and identity from chasing one dream, my first baby, Zen and Pow Studio, my fitness and yoga studio, from pivoting to just chasing that dream and scaling it and growing it to downsizing it, scaling it back, and pivoting into real estate. It's actually when I launched the podcast originally was around the same time I launched my real estate career. And then going into the new year of 2023 is when I officially launched the Sister Circle membership. It's when I had this God calling on my heart to create a membership for female small business owners. So this is all happening at the same time. I was leaving my dream brick and mortar studio to do pop-up classes. I had just sold all of my equipment. I paid off the 3 months of rent that I was behind on, and I decided to take the month of December, quote unquote, off of teaching classes so that I could re-envision that business while also making new business endeavors like the membership for Sister Circle, getting into real estate, and writing this book. So I wrapped up my 30th birthday on November 29th of that year, and I was wandering around Barnes & Noble, which you'll hear about this in the introduction, titled The Valley of Despair, and this book just jumped out at me. So a lot of you are going to ask me what it is anyway, so I figure I'd share. It's called Boundless Creativity, a spiritual workbook for overcoming self-doubt, emotional traps, and other creative blocks. Now, you might know, if you've been in a stressful season, your creativity gets zapped completely. And I consider myself a very creative person, and I just felt so depleted at the end of that year, going through all the challenges and struggles and obstacles of years of struggling, that I needed that fresh energy, that fresh creativity. So I found this workbook at Barnes & Noble, which is something I love to do, is just wander around the store, see what sticks out at me. And I started digging in, and it was all about writing your universal story. And they encourage you to have some sort of creative outlet to do that. Now, I chose to just start writing. I didn't know exactly what it would become or what would even become of it, if I would ever publish it. I always said I wanted to be an author and I wanted to publish a book ever since I was a kid. You've probably maybe seen my post about Young Authors Night, and it was just something I really enjoyed writing. But when I first started writing this book, what became the book, I was solely doing it as a creative outlet, and honestly, it was therapy. It was therapeutic for me to sit down and just take these stories and these experiences that were inside me, on my heart, honestly weighing me down, feeling heavy, and to put them onto pages and to get them out of my head and put them somewhere. So that's what my Google Doc titled Steph's Book started as. And you'll also hear in the introduction, I was invited by my friend Colleen Bostrack to speak at her Fierce event in January or February. It was early 2023. And I asked her what she wanted me to speak on. And she said, and I'm throwing out my usual, I could speak on productivity, strategy, leadership, all these like business topics. And she's like, no, I want you to share your story. And I was like, oh, like, really? Are you sure? Because what I had written down is my story and these concepts of the universal story, which is the mountains. It's exactly the mountains that you see on the cover of the book, is the highs and the lows. And that's not just business, that's life, right? So when she asked me to share my story, I thought, okay, if that's true, that she said it was inspiring, maybe because of what I'm going through and just went through and was still in the thick of, maybe that's what makes it really inspiring, is the fact that I am literally in my deepest valley right now and I'm still showing up. And through that entire year, I just continued to show up even when I didn't feel confident, when I didn't feel like it, when I would rather just sit in my office or be alone, or I felt like a failure in a lot of ways. And I've talked about that on the podcast a lot, but I just kept showing up and I just kept writing and writing whenever I felt inspired. So when I started it, I just did it for this outlet, this therapeutic kind of healing journey of writing what was on my heart. And when I felt inspired. So there was no deadline around it that like, this is going to be a published book, this is when I'm going to publish it. Absolutely none of that. The first like year and a half, I was just writing to write. I would go months without writing anything. And then I'd maybe write a lot in a short period of time. And I just kept writing through that year of 2023, which you'll read in the book was labeled my bucket list year, where I was doing all the things that I either couldn't afford or didn't have time to do in that first decade of my life because I was out of that season of stress and struggle, but I was still not sure where I was going during that year. So it was a year of trial and error of finding what filled my soul again. And I kept writing and writing and writing. And then, as you'll read in the book, and most of you know from listening to this podcast, in 2024, at the beginning of the year, is when I found out that I was expecting my first baby. And of course, naturally, that came right after deciding to finally close my first business, Zen and Pow Studio. So I closed that at the end of 2023 to create the space in my life that I so needed and was ready for the next thing. And I knew for me that was expanding my family and becoming a mom. So you'll read about that in the book too. We'll talk more about that on the podcast. I always thought the first episode back would be me talking about motherhood, but we're going to get there. So if you're wondering about that, just hold tight. But I kept writing through 2024. And the funny thing is, I mean, if you've ever been pregnant, you know there are nights where you just can't sleep. I would get pregnancy insomnia a lot, where I'd be up at 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. and I could not fall back asleep. So what I would do is I would just come up into my office and write and, call it pregnancy insomnia or call it downloads. I think that 3 a.m. period is when I was starting to get all of these downloads from my soul, from spirit, whatever you want to call it, that I was meant to be writing at that time in the morning. So it worked out perfectly. I kept writing and writing and writing. And then, by the end of summer of 2024, I started to feel a nudge that it was time to publish. And I was having so many conversations with small business owners, whether they were in our community, our membership, or outside of it, but so many people were struggling. And they were hitting their valleys, their lows, which I had at that point really come out of that season. But I knew when I was in it that it was for a reason. And I felt alone in it in a lot of ways because when I looked around, it felt like everyone else was thriving in their businesses when I was barely surviving and struggling. So in that aspect, it felt really lonely. But I just continued to build my community of people around me that still supported me, that showed up for me. That was a big kind of selfish reason for growing the Sister Circle community, was because I needed that for myself just as much as everyone else did. But towards the end of the summer of 2024, I started to feel this nudge, and every single conversation I was having with women in business was just how much they were struggling. And so then I went to the Powerhouse Women Conference in Arizona in August, almost 30 weeks pregnant by myself, made all of these friends, and I journaled in my journal that I was going to publish my book in 2025. It was going to be the year that I hit publish on the book. It felt insane to write that at the time. And it also felt like it was the right time to do it. So I came home and just surrendered to it, asked for that support that I needed to make this happen because I didn't know anything about publishing a book. I have friends that have published books, but I knew there were a lot of pieces to the publishing that I was not going to have time to do myself, nor did I want to try and learn it in the season of life that I was in. So once I put it out there, though, the right people always connect. So that's like the surrendering the how am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? If I just thought of how am I going to do this? I'm going on maternity leave. I'm about to have my first baby. And apparently I'm publishing a book. Then it would have never happened. So I asked who could help me do this. It's that concept that I'm constantly teaching of who, not how. And I was on a 6-figure school call, which is with the Powerhouse Women community last fall. And there was someone on the call named Alicia, and she had just published her book. higher self habits. And she said, hey, you got to work with this company. They helped me. You can do it. Let me connect you. And it was all I needed to make that connection. So she connected me to Big Idea to Bestseller, and I signed up in October, knowing that I was probably going to take a pause in November. But I'm glad I signed up when I did, because I got connected with a writing coach right away. And the writing coach is really the person that helped me create the flow and helped me realize the metaphor that I had, this gardening metaphor that becomes so ever present in the book, in the theme of the book. So I had almost finished the book by the time I signed up to work with this company, but I really needed that flow for the chapters. Most of it is chronological, as you can read, but there were some pieces that still needed to be moved around and made sure where they fit. And then I discovered the 4 parts and all of those things. So my writing coach really helped me do that. And then I thought that I was going to have a baby in October because my due date was the 29th. And as you'll read in the book, I was 2 weeks overdue. What to do in those 2 weeks, I don't even know what I would have done if I didn't have this project. So I thought that I was going to finish the book on maternity leave. Ha ha. What a funny joke. Definitely would not have been possible to do that, as any of you moms know. But my baby was 2 weeks overdue. So in those 2 weeks, especially when I was up at 3 a.m. a lot, when I was overdue, I almost finished the book then. I just was writing before I had my baby, which I just feel like that was divine timing. Like he was just sitting in there waiting for me to almost complete the book. And then he made his appearance, which you'll read about in the very last chapter. So I almost completed it. Then I took my maternity leave and I made it a goal to write that last chapter before the end of the year, which I finished on December 31st. And then I jumped back into my book program so that I could stay on track for my publishing timeline, which was May. So then the next piece here was just like getting into the manuscript and organizing everything with my writing coach. So I made it a point to finish the manuscript by the end of February, which I did. I don't know how I did some of this stuff. It was really just a full-on surrender experiment. Like, I am not kidding when I say this book is the biggest surrender experiment I've ever had. Because so much of the work and the timeline and what needed to get done was like either overwhelming, the parts that I had to do, or completely outside of my control, that I could not control the timeline as much as I would have liked. But it all happens for a reason. So by the end of February, I submitted the manuscript. But then I had this idea at the very last minute, like something was missing. I had my stories, I had my journey, but I really wanted you, the reader, to know that you're not alone. And even though I hope my story makes you feel that way, there's other women who are also going through these seasons. So that's when I decided, I asked my writing coach, hey, do you think I have time to include some other stories from female small business owners for each part? And she's like, if you can get these in 2 weeks, then yes, I think so. So I found some women that I felt like their stories fit really well with the different parts of planting, growing, weathering the storms, and harvest season, and asked them to write a short story for it, which was really fun to read their stories. And I hope you enjoy those in here as well. So that was a last minute add-in. And then the manuscript was submitted for edits, line edits, and oh my gosh, that is a job I would never, ever in a million years want. The line edits were intense because I write very conversational, as you'll read, but that was incredibly helpful. I would never be able to do that myself. So submitted for line edits. They made all of them. I had to approve all of them, which took some time. And all meanwhile, the cover was being designed. Now, originally, I thought this cover was going to be like planting and gardening themed. And that was one of the designs that they gave me. But they came back with these like mountains and valleys. And of course, the colors are very much on point with my brand and are kind of Zen and Pow colors. They are. But they came back with the mountains and valleys. And I was like, oh, that really stood out to me because of the introduction when I talk about the universal story and the highs and the lows. And we know there are a million highs and lows in entrepreneurship and life and everything in between. So I actually was really drawn to the mountains and valleys cover, but I wanted to incorporate the planting theme. So that's why we added in the planting here on the bottom. Which was really cool. And I'm just so happy with how it all came together. It just really did bring my vision to life. So they did an amazing job on that. It took a little longer than we anticipated, but it was worth the wait. So meanwhile, line edits happening, book covers happening, and I really have no idea when this book is going to launch. I have this like vision in my mind. Early May is what we originally had written down. And as we started getting closer to that, I just was feeling overwhelmed. I'm like, there's no way this is going to happen early May because we still needed to do page formatting and we still needed to upload it all to Amazon, which we don't know how long it will take for Amazon to approve it. So again, so many things outside of my control. Full surrender mode. I cannot tell you how many times I had to completely step back and surrender and remind myself that this book is supposed to be fun. So anytime I started feeling stressed out about it, I had to pull myself away and say, you know what? When it is supposed to be launched, it will be launched. And it's supposed to be fun. So I was really trying to get into the fun of it, the joy of it, which, gosh, if we did this with everything in life, business, all the things, imagine what would happen and what we could open up to and create. So that was really the ironic lesson that I was learning through this entire book process, was that I need to take my hands off the wheel, like more than ever. So this book was starting to begin to feel like my baby, where there was a due date. Let's call it a guest date because that's all it really is. And that's what I had with the book. It felt like a guest date. Like, I don't actually know. I know the month that I want it to launch, but maybe not even that, right? I wanted my baby to come in October. That didn't happen. So we just continue to surrender and surrender and surrender and let go. So then by the middle of May, when I had just completely surrendered the timeline, the page edits were done, the page layout, all the details that go into a book. It's incredible. Like, you get to pick your fonts and the color of the book pages. And I wanted to include some photos and just really fun things. Then I submitted the page layouts and we uploaded to Amazon. And I got an email on Sunday saying that the book was published. Here's another funny story. The book was published and it was published at $6.87. It was supposed to be $22.22, and it took Amazon up until the night before launch for it to actually update the pricing, which I was kind of starting to freak out a little bit about because, of course, I've put in a lot of money and time into this book and I wanted it to be at the price it was supposed to be. And I had to surrender that again. If the price doesn't update, I'm still launching on Thursday. That was my mindset. And then sure enough, the price updated for Thursday. So it was just a million little things that kept reminding me to surrender and surrender again and surrender some more. And all of that leading to just this incredible launch. I had the most fun ever. on launch day, in which I ordered copies that came on Wednesday. My launch day was Thursday, and I got to hand deliver them. Um, Highly recommend that for any sort of launch that you can give something tangible. And I gave them to the women that wrote stories for the book. And I also gave them to the women that wrote praise for the back of the book, who are just really inspiring me in so many different ways of business and life. And I just feel so grateful to be surrounded by all of these incredible women. So that is kind of the story of the launch and leading up to the launch and the book itself. But I also wanted to share just how divine this book was timed, because I was going into my maternity leave when I felt this push, this nudge to hit publish. And I didn't know how it was going to be completed. And then I found this company that helped me from the writing all the way to the publishing process. Even though I didn't know what date it was going to happen, it still launched in the month that I hoped for. And it truly is the thing that healed me from all of the entrepreneurial trauma that I have gone through in the last 12 years, decade plus. So when I tell you that this book is truly a labor of love, it's because it's my story, it's my journey, but it's what helped me heal and realize the powerful lessons of soul growth that came from overcoming struggles and overcoming obstacles, and just how important it was to continue to move forward when I couldn't see the path in front of me. And I know a lot of you are currently in that season. And that's why I hit publish on the book this year. That's why I made it a point to challenge myself in this way, even though it literally made no sense. Like, to be having a baby, becoming a mom for the first time, and publish a book makes no sense. But it was truly a nudge in my gut that I just continued to follow. And that is true for so many parts of my journey. And all the stories that you're going to read in this book are inspired by intuition, by God callings, by nudges, by that feeling in your stomach that, although it's scary and terrifying to put your story into a book, it's also the thing that I felt most called to do. And every time that I felt scared to hit publish, or nervous or unsure if it was the thing that I should be putting my time and money and energy into, I kept getting reminders from all of you, small business sisters, people struggling, going through the thick of it, that this is why I wrote the book. You are the reason that I made it a point to hit publish on this book right at this crazy time in my life and new motherhood and all of the things, because I wanted to be a reminder that we can do hard things and have fun. We can overcome and build resilience and embrace the journey at the same time. We can go through our deepest valleys and we can use them as a catalyst for not only growth, but for healing. And I hope that's exactly what this book demonstrates, and the entire book process behind the book is that you are called to the things you are called to for a reason. And it doesn't have to make sense to other people. It doesn't even have to make sense to you. But when you answer those callings, you are going to be shown and led down a path that you never even dreamed possible, greater than you could ever envision, because you showed up for the call. And that's a theme in the book too, is to just keep showing up. It's so easy to want to hide, to want to crawl into a corner and just cry. And don't get me wrong, I cried through so many chapters that I wrote in this book. And the last thing I really want to share about why I published now and when I did was because I knew that going into a new chapter of my life, a new season, becoming a mom was going to change me in ways I didn't even know. I couldn't even fathom. And of course it has. I knew it would. But I want you to read this book feeling the depth of the raw emotions that I experienced when I was going through it. And that was so important to me that that's why I needed to hit publish. Because I knew that if I tried to write about these stories on the other side of motherhood and just this new era of my life, it wouldn't feel that authentic because I'd be too far removed from it. So I needed to finish it. I needed to hit publish, finish the manuscript before I enter this new era, this new mom era of mine, because I wanted you to feel the feels that I felt. When I was writing these chapters, I would go back to journals. I would go back to old Facebook and Instagram posts. I even went back to some old emails, like the chapter with my landlord, and literally just tears would flow as I would write. I get choked up thinking about it now because that was the real raw emotion that I was experiencing. And it's hard for me to go back and feel that now because I am so far on the other side of that, thankfully. But I wanted you to feel how I felt in those moments. And I wanted to take you back to young entrepreneurial Steph that was just this like naive, bright-eyed, passionate entrepreneur that felt like she could do anything. And that crazy audacity is what drove me to experience the highs and the lows that I had. I truly believed that I was always being called to something greater. And I tried to follow my intuition all along the way, even when it led me into my darkest season. I had full faith that I was in that season for a reason. And I couldn't see it at the time. I didn't know why I felt like I was going through the thick of it when everyone else around me felt like they were, like I said, thriving and their businesses were just booming and they were incredible. And I was inspired by them, but I was also feeling like lonely because I didn't really see a lot of struggle around me and I was in the thick of it. But I trusted and I knew that it had to be for something. It could not be for nothing that I was going through this. And I firmly believe I went through all of those things, not only to create the businesses and build the life that I have now, because it would have never led me there if I would have continued down the path I was on and didn't make that big, hard pivot 2 years ago. But I needed to go through that. And that is the book. I would never have this book if I didn't go through my darkest seasons. No one wants to read about all of your successes and how you never struggled. I've said this for years. Like, I love an underdog story, and that's what I hope you feel in this book, in the stories in this book, whether it's from my MMA fighting to moving on from loss and failure or losing people or all of the challenges and the struggles. I just want you to feel supported by me, by the other stories in the book, by the Sister Circle community, if that's something you need and are looking for. And I want you to feel that real, true emotion. So I hope you laugh and smile when you read the book, and you might also shed some tears. And that's okay, because just know I was crying my eyes out writing some of these chapters because they're real, they're raw, they're full of emotion, the highs and lows of the emotions, the mountaintop moments, the excitement, the passion, and the sadness and the grief and the pain and the loss and the disappointment, and in between, the bittersweetness, because we can hold both. We can hold joy and sadness at the same time. We can hold gratitude and grief at the same time. And we can move forward from these pains, these losses, these seasons of grief with grit and resilience and grace. And I hope that this book inspires you to do that, to just keep showing up, to just keep moving forward, even when you're unsure of the path ahead. Because when you continue to tune back into yourself and trust your higher power, you will never be led down the wrong path. You will always be divinely guided to show up for those lessons that your soul needs to grow in just the perfect time to do so. If you haven't yet, please go get your copy, either the Kindle version, the paperback, or buy both of Seasons of a Soulpreneur. It would mean so much for me to have you read these stories, to hear your thoughts. A lot of you have been tagging me in your posts. Please continue to do that. Tag me, tag the Stephanie Lee Ross and Soul Driven with Steph Instagram accounts. Send me your thoughts. I want nothing more than to know how this book is landing and resonating with you in the season of life that you're in, and how I can continue to support you in whatever you're doing. So send me your thoughts. Tell me what's landing. I'm so excited to have the podcast back, because we're going to keep talking about the book and the different 4 parts and all the chapters on the podcast. You're going to be able to listen to the chapters of me reading them in my voice if you're more of an Audible person. I'm not doing Audible because I'm going to do the episodes right here of chapter reads on the podcast. So you're welcome. If you're someone who would rather listen than read, will you still go buy the Kindle version, please? Just so you're purchasing the book, but you can listen for free. And I'm going to break down the chapters. We're going to talk about them. Send me your thoughts. Send me your questions. Whatever you're feeling, I want to share in this journey with you. And the last thing I'll say is, and I've been hearing this from people, you don't need to be an entrepreneur to enjoy this book. It is written for the small business owner, and I have growth lessons and reflection questions, as well as intentional action for both the new business owner and the seasoned small business owner. But truly, you don't need to be a business owner to get so much out of this book. And I hope that it will just inspire you to be on your journey wherever you're at. There's tons of bonus book resources at the very end. So don't forget, scan that code. I'm going to be sharing so many more fun things with all of the readers of the book. Go write an Amazon review, take a picture, share it to social, tag me in it, send the link of the book to a friend. Like, whatever you choose to do, just know that it is in so much gratitude, that I appreciate you. I appreciate you reading the book, listening to the podcast, and just continue to share it, because I know, based on the reasons why I wrote the book, that this is what I'm called to do. And I just appreciate all of you in support. So I hope you're enjoying the reads. We're going to break down each chapter on the podcast here. So more to come, but I'm just so excited that the podcast is back, and I cannot wait to share in this journey with all of you. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Soul Driven with Steph. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to share it out with someone else who needs to hear this message. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so that you know when new episodes drop. And until next time, be sure to take care of your mind, your body, and your soul.